Good day, fish tankers. Today I'm going to talk about 10 aquarium fish that you should do a little bit of research on, or maybe just think twice before you buy them. Now, they're fairly common in the hobby. I have some of them, I've had some of them in the past, and I intend keeping some of them in the future. So they're not on my never buy this fish list. They're great fish, but they do have certain special requirements and characteristics that requires you to just take a moment and think a little bit whether they will work for you before you buy them. Want to find out what they are? Then stick around. Now, to get our fish to look the way they do, they are often line bred for colors or certain characteristics, very much like dogs. Think of a pug-nosed dog, like dogs like bulldogs and pugs. And think of my own little dog, Princess Lulu, the dachshund. She has certain special needs because she's got that long back that's vulnerable, so I have to watch that she doesn't jump off the bed, off our bed that is. So just like that, you've got fish that are far removed from the wild form. So number one would be fancy goldfish. They're cute, they've got personality, they've got these round egg-shaped bodies, but with it comes certain inherent troubles, and one of them is swim bladder trouble, where they float to the top of the aquarium and they float upside down, or they can't keep their level in the water. Now, you need to be aware of that, and with fancy goldfish, I think there's two things you can do to mitigate it. Feed them some vegetables occasionally. Blanched tea-shelled peas may work, and I've also heard good things about these vegetarian cichlid pellets, the kind that you give to mbuna. That'll help your goldfish not to get the floats. And another thing is, they are sort of cold water or cooler water fish, but fancy goldfish, I have found, and also through things that a lot of breeders have told me, do a bit better in slightly warmer water. Not as warm as some of our tropical fish, but they do better if you do get them a heater and keep the temperature of the water at around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 23, 24 degrees Celsius. So keep your fancy goldfish in slightly warmer water and let them get their veggies, and be aware that they do have sometimes, even though they're long-lived, they have slightly shorter lifespans, and that swim bladder thing can be a problem because they are prone to digestion problems and swim bladder problems. So the slightly warmer water and the veggies now and then aids their digestion. You can also feed them duckweed. Great way to get rid of your duckweed is to feed them to your goldfish. On that theme, you can also add all the other balloon type of fish, like balloon mollies, balloon rams, even red parrots. Now, these fish will have the same issues, maybe not as bad as fancy goldfish, but they also tend to get these issues, so be aware of that. Then other fish are line bred to get all these fancy colors, and what has got more fancy colors than bettas? Now, we all like bettas for their personalities, but now you've got so many varieties, there's a lot more line breeding, and I have found, when I used to keep bettas back in the 80s when I was a teenager through to the early 90s, you know, in my experience, they were a lot more hardy. They never been a long-lived fish, but I could get them into somewhere between 2 and 3 years is what they lived. These days, the last bettas that I've kept, I've only one that I could get to just over the year mark, because they get digestion issues plenty of the time. Same sort of thing as fancy goldfish, even though they don't have that elongated bodies. So be aware of that with bettas. They like the water warmer, 26 degrees Celsius, and you've got to be very careful to feed them sparingly because they are also prone to bloat. I've been managed to cure them with Epsom baths, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So bettas is another fish that can have issues because of the line breeding. And then going on to yet another one, guppies. Now, guppies have got terrific colors. We've got the red albinos and all kinds of colors, but I've also found that the quality, their durability, sort of taken a beating as a result of that. So I would see that they have properly developed bodies, not just finish. I would maybe support a local breeder. If you know that if your shop gets them from somebody who breeds locally, that could be a good thing. And also ask them where the guppies are coming from. Here in South Africa, I found the ones that come from Sri Lanka do better than the ones from Thailand or Singapore. I don't know why that is. Some people have told me they mix the sea water with the fresh water, because the fresh water is in short supply, so they keep the guppies in brackish water. It could just be certain diseases that sort of morph and breed along with the fish. I don't know. but that as well as keep guppies with, they don't like soft acidic water. So make sure your pH is at least 7 and there's a hardness of about 6 GH and KH. You know, here and there you get guppies that were bred in soft water, and there's an exception, but you can't give advice based on exceptions. So those are your line bred fish. Then you have other fish that grow bigger than people think they will grow. I'm not talking about common goldfish. We know by now they become giants. I'm not talking about Oscars. We know they are bulldogs. But certain fish people don't really know. And one of them is the Siamese algae eater. Now, we all love these fish for planted aquariums because they have one thing that eats the dreaded black-beard algae. But they start off as tiny little fish, not much bigger or the same size as an otter. And then they grow rather quickly. Within a year, they're quite a big fish. And when they're at that stage, you can get away maybe with a 3-foot tank, a 29-gallon. But the aggression issues, they can get a little bit aggressive, and that will be heightened in the smaller tank. Actually, they're then going to need a 4-foot tank, a 55-gallon. And they stop eating the blackbeard algae as they grow older. They're great for that when they're younger. So just keep in mind that you might end up with a reasonably sized fish. They're not going to be suitable for nano tanks where you, or medium-sized tanks where you find them when they are small and they eat that blackbeard algae. Please tell me in the comment section, those of you who are shrimpers, amano shrimps. Do amano shrimps eat blackbeard algae? Tell me in the comments because I've got varying answers. Some say yes, some say no. So I'd be interested to know that because that might be an alternative for the Siamese algae eater. Or if somebody, we've just talked about line breeding, can just breed as a dwarf Siamese algae eater, that'll be great. Another fish that grow bigger than people think are clown loaches. Now, I've got some clown loaches that's a reasonable size here at the back of me, but they will eventually have to move on because clown loaches, you get a tiny fish that can go into a 15-gallon tank quite easily, a small group of them, but they grow much bigger and they become a foot in length. Very few people see them at this size. Now, they grow very, very slowly. That's one thing. It's going to take years to get them there. And the other thing that I found, if you have big clown loaches, not many people have 125-gallon, 5-foot and bigger aquariums, but those who do always want big clown loaches. So I found them easier to rehome, although one must never start with that in mind. But they're easier to rehome than a big Siamese algae eater. That's just then a sort of a plain looking fish with a black stripe that doesn't eat blackbeard algae anymore. So clown loaches, be aware of that as well. Then we've got fish that are sort of stealthy, selective plant eaters. A lot of you guys keep planted tanks, and one of them is the bristlenose pleco. This is the ordinary one that I keep, but there are many different kinds, some very fancy colorations, and you can keep them in a planted aquarium, but keep in mind, if you want to keep Amazon swords, they'll make salad of it. They'll scrape off those broadleaf plants. So Amazon swords, the bristlenose pleco is a no-go. It'll eat those plants, just rather than not keep them. And another fish that'll eat certain plants, you know, are emperor tetras, and I've got a horde of them here at the back of me. But what I have discovered through these emperor tetras breeding and doing so well in this aquarium at the back of me, they don't eat Amazon swords, but they love nothing more than eating those little new Anubias leaves that come up. They like to bite off little pieces of the edges and nibbling on that. So Anubias is a slow growing plant and it's quite irritating. Emperor tetras, if you want to have a lot of Anubias growing, rather stay away from them. They leave other plants alone, but I found that they like to munch on these new Anubias leaves. Not enough to destroy or kill the plant, but just enough to sort of frustrate you a bit. So emperor tetras, they can be quite bad for that. Then moving on to fish that have specialized feeding requirements. Now the one I keep, and that's the pea puffer. Now they're easier, but keep in mind, I've heard of an odd person that were able to get them onto vibrobites. I've never met anyone in person, but they require frozen foods. At least they don't only require live foods like the next one, but you actually know that you're going to have to get them frozen brine shrimp, frozen bloodworm. Live food, of course, they will appreciate. And they also eat small snails, you know, your small rams and snails, but luckily they don't require it to wear down their beaks like the bigger puffers do. but they'll eat all of those things. But keep in mind, if you want peat puffers, you're not going to be able to feed them flakes and pellets. You're going to have those frozen blister packs of bloodworms and brine shrimps and whatever in your freezer if it upsets your spouse. So keep that in mind. Then another one that's on my bucket list is the scarlet badders. And then sticking with the scarlet badders, of course, its counterpart, the black tiger dario. I'm not sure if they're subspecies or just color variants of the same fish. But these little fish, tiny little nano fish, lots of personality, little hunters, so not really shrimp friendly, but a really nice, almost a betta-like personality, tiny little nano fish that looks very good, but they don't eat even frozen foods. They only eat live foods. So they're back at the shop, you know, the owners hatch frozen brine shrimp all the time and other live foods to feed these little fish. So if you don't have a supply of Daphnia or vinegar eels or hatching brine shrimp, if you don't have that going, if you have a fish house or a fish room, that most of you will have it then, but somebody like me, having to hatch brine shrimp all the time, that is to me sort of a no-no. I don't like that. So keep that in mind with these fish. Feeding is going to be a bit of an issue. And then the last fish is one that's of course a dwarf cichlid, and that is the German blue ram. Now, everybody likes them. You know, they do suffer a bit from inbreeding or line breeding issues at this point. I stay away from the balloon ram, as you know, but there's another thing with these rams. They do not like cooler temperatures. They're tropical fish, but they like it hot, just like discus. They like the temperature around 29 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what German blue rams need to thrive. So keep that in mind, because if you want to have one of these great aquascaped planted tanks, not all plants or many plants don't do well at those high temperatures. So keep that in mind. If you want to have a very diverse aquascape planted tanks, the temperature that your German blue ram is going to require, maybe not a good idea. You could go for a Bolivian ram. They'll be much better. They like cooler temperatures. So that might be a good alternative. But fancy aquascapes and German blue rams, just like discus for temperature requirements, maybe not the best idea. So guys, those are my picks for fish. They are nice fish, but you must just think twice a little bit before buying them for their special requirements. Let me know in the comments, what are your think twice fish that you've kept in the past, or what you intend to keep, or that was just too much for you. And until we see each other again, please remember to take good care of those domestic denizens of the deep.